Well, good morning again, and welcome to the 35th and final meeting in 2012 of the Health and Sport Committee. And as usual, can I remind, can remind those present to switch off mobile phones, Blackberries and other wireless devices as they often interfere with the sound system. The first item on our agenda today is to consider whether we take items 4 and 5 in private. Can I remind the committee the items 4 and 5 are to consider our approaches to teenage pregnancy and health inequalities, respectively. And it would be normal to have that sort of session in private. Can I have the committee's agreement to take items 4 and 5 in private? Thank you. Agenda item number 2, we have one negative incident to consider today. The Subordinate Legislation Committee has drawn this incident to the Parliament's attention on the grounds of defective drafting, and the relevant extract from the Subordinate Legislation Committee's report is included in the papers. There have been no motions to annul. So if there's no comments, is there any comments on that? No? If there's no comments, then can I put the question, which is, the question is on materials and articles in contact with food, bracket Scotland Regulations 2012, SSI 2012-318, that the committee has no recommendations to make. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We now move to item number 3 on the agenda, which is consideration of the approach to petition PE 1434. The paper recommends writing to the Scottish Government, Education Scotland and the Association for Physical Education Scotland, the Scottish Sports Association and COSLA. Can I invite comments from members in terms of the recommendation on the proposals with the petition? Gill.
Thanks very much, Convener. I actually support the recommendations, but with a caveat. And I refer to the petitioner himself, Nair MacDonald, who is asking the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to make sure that every school can provide adequate sports facilities. That in paper sounds good, and I would like to see sports facilities to be available. I've got long memories of many councils closing exceptionally good sports facilities and building houses on them. And so there lays the problem, that this responsibility is with local authorities. And I support what the petitioner is trying to do to try and achieve sports facilities available in that area. But I think the petition itself might be focusing in the wrong direction, asking the wrong people to make a decision. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that I worry about central government of any kind, whether it's the devolved government or any other government, taking powers away from local authorities. I do think that the closer to delivery of service that we can make it, the better it is. And I wouldn't like to give cause for the Scottish Government to take powers away to override decisions made at local level, although I did say I didn't agree with some of the decisions in the past at closing perfectly good sports facilities. But I do support, I think we're covering the basis here, and there's nothing wrong with asking the government. They've already responded to us in writing, but you know, I support this with the caveats that I've said today. Yeah,
you've put that on the record, I think, Gil. Mark and then Richard Simpson.
Thank you. I wonder if, as well as getting a sort of a corporate COSLA response, if we should perhaps write to either all the local authorities or a selection of the local authorities, taking into account rurality, urban authorities, etc., as well, because COSLA will give us a general response, but what we might want to know is what the individual local authorities themselves would think about this, taking on board what Gil has said about potential problems that might arise at a local level where, for example, there might be a a budgetary implication for local authorities, and maybe getting that teased out a bit more. So that might be something we want to do.
Some discussion on that. Richard?
Yeah, two things. One is Education Scotland. Does that include the inspectorate? I'm not. It does. So we would be hearing from the inspectorate whether they report on facilities as well as what we asked them to last time, which was physical literacy. So we make that specific within that. The other thing is that whether we should be writing to the government to ask whether the what's it called, Scottish Futures Trust, the one that's building all these new schools, whether they in fact have a requirement to consult Sports Scotland to ensure that any new build that there is that's being funded by, because the business plans have to be approved by the government, so the government should actually, I think, I mean, I agree with Gil, it's a local authority responsibility, but I think if they're funding it and they're going to borrow the money to do so, then they should also be insisting that any new school has appropriate facilities attached to it, which is what Sports Scotland asked for in their letter.
Oh.
Two things. Firstly, I think Richard's suggestion about any funding to local authorities and Scottish Government for new schools, what criteria is laid down for adequate sports provision would seem to be a reasonable thing to ask the Scottish Government. I don't think I'd make it specific to Sports Scotland. I think I would just ask the question, what criteria is there to make sure there's adequate sports provision, to be honest. And when we discussed this last, I'd said I thought it was a matter for local authorities, and what I was keen to find out was when individual schools are inspected and what kind of recommendations could be made in terms of the physical environment for sports provision and how that would drive the investment plan within a local authority area. But if that will be captured by writing to Education Scotland, then fine. But I think that's the key point for myself. The only other thing to add, I suppose, is whilst we do appear to be keeping the petition open, we are obviously moving tangential away from the original petition, and I think we have to be clear with the petitioner that that's what we're doing, because we think that's the best way to take forward this issue ourselves, rather than give the petitioner any kind of false hope that we believe this is a Scottish Government matter, because I'm fairly sure, given the discussion we've had, we all seem to believe that it is actually a local authority matter.
Okay. I think some of that reflection could be taken up in the correspondence, can't it? I think it leaves us just to clarify 2 or 3 points, and that would be the local authorities. By writing to the local authorities, does that make the point, or does it escalate it at this point? That we're asking for 32 responses. I just want a wee bit of discussion about that. So we need to agree that that's what we would want to do, one way or the other. We need to reflect Bob's point in the letter to the education inspection people. And Richard, do we agree with writing to the Scottish Futures Trust, or is that going to be taken care of in the letter to the government? I think Bob suggested that could be covered. Rather than writing to the Scottish Futures Trust, we could address that point.
Determine the remit for the Scottish Futures Trust,
so you're
quite
happy. I'm just clarifying that.
That's
so
fine.
that's okay, that can be taken care, and that will be included in the letter to the government. I think that just leaves us then with whether we write to all 32 local authorities. It's whether at this point we do that, or whether we feel we would maybe want to do that at some future time, depending on the responses from this select group about the... Mark?
On the basis of what's being said, and I think the answers from Education Scotland and indeed from the Scottish Government might give us a bit more illumination that we could then perhaps write to local authorities beyond that. I think the issue I had was around, there are some areas where, for example, there are schools where, because they're in such a tightly packed urban area, they're not going to be able to provide, say, for example, playing fields, where schools in a more rural setting or a more suburban setting might be able to do that. So I think when we see the response from the Scottish Government and Education Scotland, we can make a decision as to whether we want to widen it out.
I think that's helpful. And I suppose the petitioner can be pointed to or referred to the evidence sessions and the remarks that have been made on the record in regards to the Scottish Government's responsibility and the responsibility of local government should give a clear indication to the petitioner where we see the ultimate responsibility lying, but other bodies being. Are we okay with that? Yeah. Thanks. We now move to agenda item number 4, approach the inquiry of teenage pregnancy, which we previously agreed would be held in private. Thank you.